This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What do you guys want to talk about?
No time to waste. Must go. It's WrestleMania season, baby. Gotta amp up the enthusiasm on this one. But is it really WrestleMania season? Now, there is allegedly a WrestleMania show coming up in T-minus 7 days. Could have fooled me. Especially with the way that SmackDown show went on Friday night. God, if y'all thought my reviews were boring, you should try watching an episode of SmackDown in your spare time. How people stay awake watching that show is beyond me. You have not seen boring until you manage to sit through one of those shows for 2 hours. Talk about draining the life out of a dead carcass. I've seen corpses with more energy than what I see happen on those SmackDown shows. And again, all joking aside, if the goal is to ramp up as much enthusiasm for that big two-night extravaganza this coming weekend as humanly possible, they're not doing a good job. I mean, they're trying in some aspects. But man, I'm looking at this card right now in front of me. It's definitely a card. Does it have the vibe of a WrestleMania card? No, not necessarily. Some of the matches grab my attention, but there are definitely some that leave my head spinning. Some of them I'm looking at right now, I'm like, are we sure this is for real? This isn't a rib? I mean, it is Wikipedia. People can edit this thing at their leisure, but I'll save it for the preview portion of today's episode when I go over the card and talk about my expectations or lack thereof with some of these matches. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and follow the regular formula of the Monday show. We've got Retro Raw to talk about, and as I just alluded to a second ago, we also have the SmackDown report to go over. What the heck? Haven't done this in a while, so might as well get some plugs out of the way. If you're tuning in for the first time, awesome sauce. You can also check us out on Rumble if you so choose. We're here on Mondays and Fridays. Got a whole gamut of stuff we talk about here. The Monday show has kind of been regulated to following a WWF, WWE format. So you get that with Monday shows. On the Friday episodes, we do the AEW Dynamite report, as well as the second half of our retro review series where we talk about NWA World Championship Wrestling, Crockett Promotions, and we also talk about World Class Championship Wrestling. Been doing that for about a year now, so we're just working our way through the library as we are with the Retro Raw reports. It's been a lot of fun, and it's probably one of the only reasons I'm still on here doing this. But yeah, I like to break up the monotony a little bit by talking about bad modern wrestling too, because I know people love hearing me rant about that. But now, how's about we get going with this one? Because I don't know how long that WrestleMania preview portion is going to take. Could go on for 3 or 4, maybe 5. If anybody gets that reference, please comment down below. Anyway, why don't we get going with the Retro Raw show? This would be the March 28th, 1994 episode. And how's this for a cold open? Ted DiBiase forcibly bribing 3 plants in the front row to leave their seats. Here's exactly how the show begins. I'm not kidding. DiBiase is hovering over two grown women in the front row. I believe there was also another child present. Upon first viewing, it looked like DiBiase was trying to coerce these women into, for lack of better terms, provocative acts. Literally, all we see is DiBiase standing over these women flashing $100 bills in hand, with him basically saying, "You two, up there, now." And he's pointing to the skybox area, and the women are just kind of sitting there going, "Right now?" And I'm like, where's all this going? Are we about to see a crime get committed here on broad daylight on national cable television? Come to find out instead, DiBiase kicked them out of their seats so that he could then pop a squat in one of the chairs, and then he laughed. As did the people surrounding him, probably figuring to themselves, sucks to be those poor gals. But it is good to know that no crimes were committed here. The only thing we established by the end of this was that Ted DiBiase was a dick, which I think we already kind of knew about. Regardless, it was a rather strange start to the show, and boy did it only get stranger from there. For example, Jim Cornette's color choice for his suit this week. Christmas came early, I guess. A red blazer with a green shirt and yellow tie. Maybe he was just trying to represent Bolivia. I think Bolivia's flag colors are red, green, and yellow. Don't quote me on that. In any case, he's obviously still mad about Yokozuna losing the World Wrestling Federation Championship at WrestleMania, said that he would be here to address the truth about what really happened in that match. It wasn't Yokozuna slipping on a banana peel that cost him the match. There was a grave miscarriage of justice that occurred. Someone clearly lubed the ropes. Perhaps it was Lex Luger, who just so happened to be wrestling in this week's opener. He took on the model Rick Martel, a match that I believe they set up on last week's show. Speaking of Mania 10 fallout, we all remember after reviewing the show last Monday, Luger was also screwed out of his match for the WWF Championship, due in large part to Mr. Perfect going into business for himself, contrary to what Corny would have you believing on commentary. Now, there's obviously a story taking part in this match. Luger's still miffed about what happened at WrestleMania, so he's out there running through Martel and fighting like he's got the biggest chip on his shoulder. Meanwhile, Cornette's mocking him for being a hothead. This was the point in the show where they cut to show DiBiase hanging out in the seats behind the commentary desk, counting his money and laughing as only the $1 Million Man knows how. Up to this point, still haven't explained why DiBiase kicked 3 plants out of the front row. Meanwhile, the match is kind of chugging along right before they cut to their first commercial break. And while Luger's working over Martel in a standing headlock, Vince begins to admire Luger's body, as only Vince McMahon knows how, at which point he calls him, and I listened back to this like 8 times in a row to try and catch the word Vince was attempting to say. I'm not entirely convinced he didn't just make this word up on the fly. The best I can make out of it was him calling Lex a Mesodorf. To which Cornette's only response was him asking, what's Luger's religion got to do with anything? If anyone up to and including Jim Cornette himself has a single fucking clue what Vince said here, please inform me. Because I tried going back and listening to this like 8 or 9 times. I couldn't figure out what the hell this guy was trying to say. Mesodorf. I got nothing. But they come back from break. By this point, my notes are pretty scattered in terms of anything remotely interesting to cover. Literally, it was the most basic match you've ever seen. Heat from the model, Luger milks a comeback. They do a spot at the end where the model tries to grab the ropes to counter a roll through, but Luger gets right back up and starts firing away. Hits him with a power slam off the ropes. And like every Lex Luger match you've ever seen in your entire life, the only thing that people remotely pop for whenever Luger's wrestling, the finishing rack. It always does the trick. No joke. It's like clockwork, man. Lex Luger could have the most boring, monotonous, one-dimensional match in the world, and all he has to do is slap on that rack. The people all leap to their feet with excitement and jizz all over the guy. They just want to see this guy pick dudes up and rack them on his shoulders and flex his muscles. It's kind of hilarious if you think about it for a minute, but this is basically what Lex Luger ran for in his entire career. Never mattered what the guy did in the ring. As long as the people got to see the rack, they didn't give a fuck what he did. So then we come back for an Owen Hart squash. The setup prior to the commercial was Owen saying, and I quote, "Now that I've beaten Brett, I can beat anybody." Apparently up to and including Mike Friedman. This was quite the skill set that the Rocket had to overcome. Beating Brett in that instant classic at WrestleMania, then having to turn around here on Raw 2 weeks later to wrestle Mike Friedman. Man, they're just really putting this guy through the ringer, aren't they? Well, you'll be shocked to hear Owen didn't have much of a problem winning. I was more so fixated on the story of DiBiase. They've got the camera shooting DiBiase, Cornette, and Vince at ringside, still attempting to somewhat capture the match that is currently going on, but, it's basically just background noise. And the conclusion to DiBiase's promo, why he bought off the fans earlier and stole their seats, was that everyone has a price. That was his rationale. And as Jim Cornette noted here, up to and including Vince McMahon himself. To which I then thought, well, he's got a point. That price came about 29 years later, but I guess you could say Jim was right. Yet again. All it took were multiple NDAs to surface from out of the woodwork, but yeah, it's true. Even the great Vince McMahon, the man that defeated the federal government in court, even that guy has a price. I also liked at the end of the segment, in Cornette's best efforts to pump up Owen, his conclusion to Vince was, how many times did Owen and Brett wrestle? And of course Vince goes, well, once. Cornette goes, and how many times did Owen win? Vince again goes, once. So Cornette's justification was, well then by all accounts, he's batting 1,000, and that's good enough for me. And I thought, well, I can't argue with that logic. So at this point in the program, in my best efforts to entertain myself, WWF's 1994 equivalent to Orange Cassidy and Danhausen came out, aka the irredeemable attempts at bad comedy. Yes, I am referring to Dink and Doink. So they come out. Doink proceeds to squirt water on DiBiase in the front row. And prior to them pitching to yet another commercial, the only thing I took away from it was Cornette mocking the situation by saying that if it's New York water, it could be contaminated. And despite Cornette being a heel, I'll never knock anybody that takes shots at horribly governed blue states. So I approve of that message. Unfortunately, that's the only positive I can take away from this segment. It's Doink wrestling some fat blob named Eric Cody, wearing the world's worst-looking wrestling gear. It's a total comedy match, not a very good one at that. Aside from Cornette calling Dink half pint and squirt and midget, it wasn't too much to take away from it. At one point, Dink randomly interfered and did the comedy spot where he stampeded over Cody's stomach while he was laying on the mat. One may rationally think, well, wouldn't that be grounds for a DQ since it happened in plain view of the official? You would think that, but don't put too much thought into it. You might drive yourself crazy. Luckily, that was at least short, so I could preserve a little bit of my sanity. And then came our second featured angle on the program. Last week, the Quebecers were confronted by Captain Lou Albano, and he laid out the challenge to Pierre and Jacques to see if they'd be willing to step up to the plate to wrestle any team of Lou's choosing. So while Cornette is attempting to conduct an interview with the Quebecers and Johnny Polo, here comes Captain Lou to see if the heel champions are actually going to live up to their word. And of course they accept. So off runs Captain Crunch, as Jacques noted beforehand. He goes to the back, and he brings out his chosen guns. Not before Johnny Polo shouts, and I quote, "Take a Metamucil while you're back there, you old coot." That actually got a pop out of me for some reason. And we come to find out that Albano's chosen men for this title match are none other than the Head Shrinkers. Here comes Samu. Here comes Fatu. Here comes Afa. Here comes a giant wind gust. Can you guys hear that outside right now? Holy shit. This day's been weird. It's gone off and on between storming and sunlight. Now that's Pittsburgh for you in a nutshell. Anyway, what the hell are we talking about here? Oh, yeah. The promo segment here. So, yeah, the Head Shrinkers are out to the ring. And, of course, the champs are now shitting their pants, realizing that Albano didn't choose a set of jabronis. So, of course, Polo and the Quebecers are trying to backpedal and plead their case that the Head Shrinkers weren't part of the conversation. But Albano throws it back at them by saying the champs accepted any tag team that he put together. So they got two choices. They can either accept the challenge, or Captain Albano goes to President Jack Tunney to see it fit that the Quebecers get stripped of the belts. Begrudgingly, they accept. And while I'm sitting there waiting for them to come back from break to kickstart the match, they come back, and what should they cut to but the 1-2-3 Kid versus the Black Phantom. Yes, that was their follow-up after they officially cemented who the Quebecers would be defending the tag belts against. An unceremonious cutaway. And they come back for the 1-2-3 Kid versus the Black Phantom. At least the Phantom looked like a job guy under a mask that actually bothered to pick up some dumbbells in his spare time. So it wasn't completely insulting. But, well, they had a match. My notes consist entirely of the following bullet points. Jim Cornette puts over Rush Limbaugh in 1994. Whether or not that was kayfabe, kind of put into perspective the reality that we all kind of figured Cornette was a Republican. I'm sure he'd love hearing that. The commentators also made an underhanded snide remark about Amy Carter here. The reference went completely over my head. And Waltman did some flashy-looking stuff for a few minutes, ended up winning with the crossbody. At which point, the punchline to the whole segment, after Cornette's putting over Waltman in the upcoming 10-man tag for next week's show, the match that was supposed to happen at WrestleMania but got cut due to time constraints. After all that, Vince's final line for the segment was, "Amy Carter?" I laughed. And then for our TV main event, it is Crush versus Ray Hudson, which was also preceded with, show of hands for anybody that did not see this coming, another goddamn Nikolai Volkov cameo. Now, of course, if you know your Retro Raw history, you'd probably be able to assert that these Nikolai cameo appearances we've been seeing are eventually going to lead to something of value. I mean, how can they not be? Is this not the 11th week in a row that they've shot Nikolai Volkov sitting in the front row on these Raw shows? He never does anything. He literally just sits there and watches the show. Vince acknowledges him. They put the camera on him for all of about 20 seconds. We're all sitting there going, yes, that is indeed Nikolai Volkov in the flesh. And then they cut away. He never does anything, which makes the whole thing that much more hilarious. For sake of not revealing anything in the timeline, I'll just keep that all on the down low. But up to this point, if you didn't know any better, you'd probably be thinking to yourself, are we sure the Nikolai thing isn't a rib? Well, it's not. But I can't blame you for thinking such by this point. It doesn't get any more logical when the big reveal does happen. But again, I'm just going to keep that to myself so you can all remain in suspense. This is all much more intriguing than the actual squash, by the way. Crush had a boring match. Again. Threw the guy around for a while, picked him up and slammed him. He eventually won with something. It looked like he was attempting a knee drop, but I don't think he entirely connected with it. And their final pitch for next week's show, again, was the promotion of the 10-man tag with all the undercard guys that we did not see at Mania, as well as a WrestleMania rematch. And of all the fucking matches to rematch on that show, guess which one they chose? Earthquake versus Atom Bomb. The match that went about 15 seconds and ended with Earthquake squashing Bomb in short order. Yeah, that match. That was the one they decided, yeah, let's do round 2. It'll be fun. Yeah, I'll bet. Well, that was the show. I'm starting to pick up on a pattern here. These Retro Raw shows, they're very quickly diminishing in quality. It's almost like that's an omen for what's about to come in the next year. Buckle up, kiddos. It's only destined to get worse from here. But as we turn things over to the blue brand, well, let me first go ahead and address this while SmackDown's on my mind here. Since we're already going to be covering 2 nights of WrestleMania next weekend, which are already going to be relatively longer reviews to begin with, I decided that I'm going to cut the SmackDown report next weekend. I mean, it'll be redundant anyway. There's really not a whole lot to talk about by that point. I had that sitting here as a bullet point in my notes to mention it in my plans for next week's show, so I figured I'd address it now. We'll go over the actual Mania card preview after we run everything down here, but just as a heads up for next week, no SmackDown report. But But I did note a couple things about the opening VTR with the Usos, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn. Apparently there was a promo segment on Raw between Owens and Zayn where they sort of hashed out everything and patched up their differences and initiated the challenge for the Usos at WrestleMania. Not a particularly groundbreaking news bulletin. I think everybody and their dead grandmother saw that coming a mile away. They didn't really go into detail about the particulars of why Owens had the last second change of heart. All we really got from the clip was, "You opened my eyes," or something kind of broad and generic. And before he knew it, that's when the Usos came out and got into the four-way brawl. They meticulously made sure to cover the shot where Owens and one of the Usos were out on the floor throwing windmill haymakers. That was quite wonderful. You know, it kind of got me thinking. Remember when fights and pull-aparts in wrestling actually used to look like two guys getting into a real bar fight? Now every wrestling brawl looks phony beyond belief. Seriously, all you ever see are guys throwing weak-ass pussy punches or guys slamming each other into barricades at ringside. When did that become a thing in wrestling? Where you build to the angle where the guys finally touch and they're supposed to be engaging in a realistic-looking fight, but then when you see them actually touch, you're like, Jesus Christ, that looks phonier than a football bat. I don't know, it just hit me watching that brawl. And nothing against the four guys involved, but it's been something weighing on my mind for a while now because I see it in AEW all the time too. Just makes you wonder, shouldn't that be part of the training course when guys get signed to developmental? I think everybody should be put through the ringer. Everybody has to have a bar fight at some point before they get signed. That way, if they ever do get into a angle fight, you know, at least they can make it look real. But in any case, I'm still looking forward to the tag title match. The other thing that crossed my mind, watching those guys do that fight, I'm like, God, I hope Owens doesn't turn on Sammy. It's like, I mean, I don't expect it to happen, but there's a little bug in the back of my head that's saying, well, you know, going by rote, you know the history between Owens and Zayn. Would you really be all that shocked to see one guy turn on the other? This could all be a ruse. Just saying. Anyway, on to this penultimate edition of SmackDown before WrestleMania weekend, which is next week. Hence the word penultimate, I guess. Geez, there's a word I haven't heard articulated in a hot minute. So here comes Cody Rhodes to open things up. At first, thinking he was coming out to do a promo. I honestly can't remember the last time one of these SmackDown shows opened up with anything other than a 15-minute rambling promo segment. Brought me back to the good old days of Hunter's never-ending monologues on Raw when he was the world champion. And he'd bore everybody into a coma with trying to put himself over. The good times. But no. Cody was out there at the opening of the program to wrestle. First time I've actually seen Cody in action since, well, obviously the Royal Rumble where he made his return. But in terms of a one-on-one match, I mean, I guess you have to go back to the Cell match with Rollins last year where he got hurt. I think maybe he's worked a couple Raw matches recently, but, well, since I don't watch Raw, I never saw those matches. Anyway, his opponent, Ludwig Kaiser, or as the female ring announcer put it, Ludwig Kaiser. In a very bizarre, soothing NPR-like delivery. The fuck was that? Seriously, is she not the worst? She's almost as bad as Justin Roberts. Out there giving herself a hernia with the ring intros every week. So here's an interesting detail. This was Cody's first match on SmackDown in 7 years. The last time he worked on SmackDown, it would have been when he was still running with the Stardust gimmick. So that was kind of cool to hear. I mean, I sure as hell didn't remember that. I barely remember the Stardust gimmick. I did laugh, though. They say it's Cody's big return to wrestle on the Blue brand in well over 7 years. So, of course, they go to ring the bell. The match goes 2 minutes. Guess where they went? Take a wild guess. That's right. They went to a break. I just thought, really? You couldn't let the motherfuckers go 5 minutes? You had to pitch to a commercial in 2? God damn, that pissed me off. And it was a good match. You know, Cody's always solid and sound in the ring. Kaiser's not a bad wrestler. He's just been a human punching bag for so long now, it's hard to take anything he does seriously. I probably wasn't a big fan of watching Cody sell for as long as he did here. Again, it goes all back to the credibility factor of Kaiser. You throw Cody in there with a guy that's been featured and presented like a big deal. I can buy the idea of Cody having to fight from underneath. You know, especially if you put him in there with a bigger guy that can overpower him. But Ludwig Kaiser, I mean, he's smaller than Cody for one. And again, the guy's been Gunther's flunky since the NXT days. Why would I believe for a second that if this were real, Cody would have an issue trying to take this guy down in less than 5 minutes? It was just too 50-50 for my taste. You know, especially with what they're setting Cody up for in less than a week, as of this recording. This guy is supposed to be your number one babyface challenging for the top belt. He's going up against your top heel that's been undefeated for like 3 years. It's a pretty big deal. So why would you be putting Cody in vulnerable situations where he's having trouble beating an underneath job guy? Doesn't really do him any favors. I mean, there were some story elements they played up here. I guess from stuff they did on Raw a few days ago. I think there was an angle where Cody kicked Solo Sikoa in the head and hurt his ankle. That's cool, I guess. Would have been nice to maybe see a video package of that so I could figure out what the hell exactly happened. So, so when Kaiser went to chop block Cody before the second break, that was their way of transitioning to the heat portion. And you had Paul Heyman and Solo coming out right before the break to try and work the mind game story with Cody. And it did get me thinking right there at that point. If you were going to have Cody work this style of babyface match where he has to valiantly fight from underneath the whole time, wouldn't it have just made more sense to book him against Solo Sikoa? I mean, it's definitely more believable to watch Cody sell when he's getting his ass kicked by Solo Sikoa than it is Ludwig Kaiser. I don't know. Well, I'll talk about it a little bit in the afterbirth. But, they came back from break. Cody was starting to milk the comeback. He's firing back and hitting some offense on Kaiser. They had a brief moment where Kaiser tried to cut him off again and work him over. I think that was the moment in the match where I realized this fucking crowd is deader than a doornail for this thing. I mean, they popped when Cody started making his comeback and hitting all his big moves, but anytime he was in jeopardy or he was selling on the mat, these people were just sitting there like they were at a funeral. They did not care one iota. But finally, Cody hit the one-legged cutter off the ropes. I still hate that move. I think it's dumb and ghetto as fuck. Albeit it was impressive seeing Cody leap up to the middle rope with one foot and then bouncing back pretty seamlessly. And of course, he ends up winning with the Crossroads. Good TV match. Everything they did was fine. Nothing was visually insulting or anything. But my complaint comes with the fact that I don't think this was the right match for Cody to have. This close to WrestleMania, he needs to be looking as strong as humanly possible. You want to send Cody out there to squash Kaiser in 3 minutes and walk out pretty unscathed? More power to you. Book that shit. I'm down for that. But watching Cody struggle for 12 minutes or however long the match went, through multiple commercial breaks, and then getting the win after selling for like 70% of the match? Nah. Not the way I would have laid it out. But you hear me say constantly, I don't get paid to agent the matches. I just come here on the internet and bitch about how better it would be if I put it together. Because I've watched this shit for 20 plus years and I know what looks more credible on paper and what doesn't. But again, we weren't done there. Because after Cody wins, here comes Paul and Sikoa for a chit-chat. And of course, Heyman's right on point from the beginning with the Weasley comments. Standing there talking about how they owe Cody an apology because the ring announcer did a rotten job putting over Cody's big win. So he does the whole charade for Cody like he would do with Lesnar and Reigns. Your winner, and still challenging for the reigning, defending, undisputed WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes. And I'm just sitting there like, he's such a fucking asshole. In any case, he kind of laid out the remainder of the story for what we're going to see before WrestleMania next weekend. He did officially lay out the challenge for Cody versus Sikoa. I think on the go-home show next week. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I think they booked that for Raw. Bummer. And at the same time, Roman will also be on SmackDown next week to pick up the scraps of whatever's left after Solo bulldozes over Cody. So, again, they are going to end up doing that match. Just going to happen next week. So I guess I can retract my previous tangent. Although I still maintain that I wouldn't have laid out the Cody Kaiser match the way they did here. But I digress. But Cody fires back on Heyman, basically tells him that he can keep shifting the goalpost all he wants. As far as Cody sees it, he wrestled the match with half his body hanging off of him and he still won. And as tough as Solo is, Cody is on a whole different level right now. So yes, he accepts the challenge for next week, and he just wants Solo to remember that he's not ready. And of course, everybody starts chanting, "You're not ready." So, I guess Cody has 2 catchphrases now. So that was all good. Good match, good promo. And like I said, they're still running with the obstacle story, trying to draw more sympathy on Cody prior to the big showdown with Roman. It's definitely more of an obstacle than what's upcoming for Mr. Jonathan Felix Anthony Cena in 6 days. What a fucking power play. Cena pulling the ultimate trump card, saying, yeah, I'll work with Austin Theory at WrestleMania, and I'll put him over, but you better book me in the opening match on night 1 so I can get in and get out, brother. Well played, John. Well played. Applause. Job well done. I see right through that. Since I'm already in a rather sarcastic mood, I guess this will bleed over perfectly into the next promo segment with Charlotte Flair, wherein her first bit of dialogue in the promo consisted of her saying that as a 14-time women's champion, she can assure us it was not built on fear, insecurities, or nepotism. The jokes write themselves, don't they? Yeah, I'm sure we all believe that bullshit notion that Charlotte's 14-time world title reign had nothing to do with her being the daughter of an all-time legend. In the WWE? No. Not a chance. So that was unintentionally hilarious. Might have been the funniest thing Charlotte's ever said now that I think about it. She did at least have the common courtesy to inform us that she still battles with insecurities. Aw. I empathize. So, well, I think this promo can be summed up in pretty short order because the fans let her know what they thought of it. Charlotte's out there boring them all to tears listening to her talk. She's droning on and on and on about God knows what. And they all start whatting her, which then prompted Charlotte to cut herself off mid-promo so that she could start healing the fans, even though I'm pretty sure she's supposed to be a babyface, because she fucking sucks at her job as a talent, and she fucking sucks even more as a babyface. And after she once again name-dropped her father, the fans basically responded by letting her know, oh yeah, your dad's cool, but what's so special about your overrated, uncharismatic, blonde-looking ass? And the answer is, well, nothing. There's nothing remotely special about Charlotte Flair. And there never was. Because she sucks. And she's always sucked. Both before and after the Botox injections. But I'll get off my soapbox, because I want to keep things moving along here. Let's talk about something good. Rey Mysterio versus LA Knight. Yeah. And holy shit, LA Knight won a match for a change. Double yeah. God, it only took him, 6 months? To figure out they ought to be giving this guy some occasional wins on TV? Better late than never, I guess. But how often is that the case when it comes to wrestling anymore? You get a guy that naturally and organically gets over with the crowd because he's good at what he does. So, instead of taking advantage of that and trying to capitalize on that momentum, like a smart promoter would, well, instead, you just bury the guy into oblivion to the point where people stop caring. I mean, Tony Khan's been doing it on the other channel for well over 2 years now. I actually forgot this was something they set up on last week's show with that pre-tape in the back where Rey punched LA Knight in the face. I mean, the whole segment went like 15 seconds. Much like the opener, though, it was another really solid match. Rey's great. LA Knight's fantastic as a heel. Dom is Dom. Forgot to mention he came out here to run a distraction spot before the commercial break. Rey's perched on the top rope, and right before he's about to jump off, Dom's music hits, and here he comes strolling out from the back so Knight could cut Rey off on the top turnbuckle. And it is kind of funny if you think, how did Dom manage to get the production team to hit his music? Was Mommy Ripley in the truck threatening the staff? Now, if you look past that, I wrote down here as a side note, anybody that is currently in the business right now that wants to learn how to be an effective heel, watch LA Knight wrestle. Not just wrestle, but watch anything he's involved with. Not only does his shit look flawless in execution, but he's so good at the basic stuff too. The heel gestures, the taunting, the facials. Like, he's got everything down packed. And like I said, even the moves look so fluid. My favorite spot in the match was the point where he caught Ray in that fall-away slam position. In one swift motion, he basically turns him around and hits him with an over-the-shoulder power slam. That was the best power slam I've ever seen anybody do. Looked tremendous. But he knows how to slow the pace down. He knows how to work the crowd. He knows how to do all the subtle things to get under people's skin. Makes it fun to watch him wrestle. Now, of course, the crowd cheers 90% of it because the guy's so fucking good. I'm trying to think, how old is this guy? I mean, I know he's not super young, but he's got to be in his mid-30s, right? Pull up another tab here. L.A. Knight. Real name is Sean Ricker. Holy shit. The man's 40 years old? No. That can't be right. It's got to be inaccurate. No way that dude's 40. I mean, it says here he was born in 82. Guess that would technically make him 40. 39 if we're splitting hairs. Unless his birthday already happened. God, I don't believe that. He looks great for his age. 40 fucking years old. Wow. He didn't look a day over 35. Stay in shape, people. Take care of yourself. You could look like that guy when you're in your 40s. Keep on keeping on, Mr. Knight. With the direction you're on, you could easily squeeze out another 4 or 5 years in this business. Stay healthy, work smart. Don't do anything stupid like all the young punks are doing in the business anymore. That guy needs to have at least one world title reign before he retires. He's way too good for them to miss the boat on that opportunity. I mean, at the very least, the guy's deserving of a main event push. I mean, even if he doesn't wind up winning the title, he doesn't even have to. Can you all imagine what a program would look like between him and Cody for the Universal title? God, that would be fantastic. Especially if they keep the belt on Cody for a while. I could see those guys doing some real damn good business together. Love to see that. First, they got to quit jobbing him out and making him look like a scrub. But, you know, baby steps. That's the objective. They got him away from Bray Wyatt. That was step one. Now the guy's just got to win more than one match. But as I noted, this is a really strong match. Both guys look great. They worked very well together. And with Dom being the deciding factor at the end there, he tripped up Ray and distracted him long enough for LA Knight to sneak in the back door and grab a handful of tights for the 3. And you know what? I'll take it. A win is a win is a win in my book. After watching them job this guy out for the better part of half a year, I'll take the W's where I can get them. Seeing him lose to Xavier Woods made me almost lose my ever-loving mind. And even though they didn't necessarily put him over here, he still won. So fuck yeah. That brings him one step closer to getting that eventual title match with Cody. But on the subject of the Dom Ray thing, well, I guess Dom finally did it. He got the Ray. It only took disrespecting his mother and sister at ringside to do it. But Dom finally got a receipt for being a delinquent douchebag. Ray came over to ringside. He walked right up to Dom, punched him square in the face. And the crowd shat themselves. Like they literally just saw Ray win the world championship again. All he did was accept Dom's WrestleMania challenge. And, Well, now the fight is on. Hope it delivers, considering all the buildup they put into this. It's definitely the biggest match Dom's had in WWE to date. And while I am looking forward to the match, I've definitely heard some moderately good counterbalancing arguments as to why people aren't really digging this feud, why they don't care to see it. I can see it both ways. It's definitely been walking a fine line with the way they've been building it up on television. There is a believability issue to where people see Dom versus Rey on paper and think, how can anybody reasonably buy the idea that Rey would want to actually beat the shit out of his own son? And I get it. I mean, it's not like Dom set a fireball to his face or tied his sister up to the ring post and started lighting a burnt cigarette on her chest. He basically just told his mom to shut up. And after all that waiting, after all the insults, all the backhanded comments, all the attempts at tarnishing Rey's career and slandering his legacy, all it took was for Dom to tell his mom to shut up. And now here comes Papa Rey to the rescue, telling him, don't you ever disrespect your mother like that. It is kind of wacky, but I mean, the people pop for the payoff. They wanted to see Dom get his comeuppance. And again, who knows? Maybe the match will get over. Maybe it'll deliver. It'll be a real test for Dom to see how he does under the pressure of working in that environment. I mean, he's already worked WrestleMania before. That's nothing new for him. But in terms of a featured one-on-one capacity, it is a little bit different. Because in a tag team setting, there are rest periods. There's chances for him to catch his breath and sort of recoup on the apron. Not in this match, though. This is go from start time to finish time. And Dom's been very solid with what he's been given to work with on television. Now we just need to see him deliver in the ultimate blow-off. It's a sink or swim kind of situation for him, but they've given him the rub. We'll see how he does. I mean, I have all the confidence in the world that they're going to lay that match out good and Rey's going to carry him. Like, I'm not expecting the match to be bad or anything. I do understand why people are not particularly looking forward to the match. So, it's not going to hinder my enjoyment of it, but to each their own, I guess. So after that was a botch Z Natalia versus Lacey Evans Xia Li match that I skipped over because see the participants involved. I can assure you that I'll be able to wake up in 7 days and not feel guilty about having skipped over a match involving botch Z. I'm sure it was lousy, as are most matches where botch Z Shotzi's involved. Speaking of lousy, how about that three-way contract signing with Drew, Sheamus, and Gunther? Yeah, they're still doing these. Contract signings. Because those segments never end in disaster. Or dead bodies end up getting sprawled in every which direction. Tables evidently get broken. Never seen that before. Well, as somebody wise once quoted, they're formalities. We all know how they end. And they're never particularly exciting to begin with before all the brawling and chaos ensues. In this case, for good or for worse, we can at least validate the tables were not broken, per se. One was thrown and came precariously close to taking out the entire front row opposite the hard cam. But I just want you to think about all this for a minute here. They booked a contract signing with Drew McIntyre, Sheamus, and Gunther And the payoff by the end of it was to set up an impromptu match for after the break between Gunther and Butch. Butch. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, it was fun watching Gunther slam the shit out of him, but why? Exactly? Because Butch got butthurt that Gunther threatened to beat his ass if he got involved at WrestleMania? That's what set him off? Seems perfectly rational to me, I guess. Yet again, too, a clear-cut example on this show where apparently they go into the program not having an entire card pre-planned. So whenever someone demands that Adam Pearce book a match on the fly, of course, no problem. He's right there to make it happen. Gunther's like, I want the match with Butch. Book it right now. And Pearce goes, you got it. Ring the bell. Gee, good thing Butch was there to expediently pick a fight with Gunther on spur of the moment. Probably would have had 10 minutes of dead air time. So it ends up spilling out to the floor momentarily. Gunther sends Butch flying into the announce desk like a torpedo, hit him with a chop. It actually looked kind of cool. Meanwhile, they have the three-way stare down with all the guys that are participating in the title match. Conveniently so Butch can try to charge at Gunther but accidentally run into Drew. And fittingly, that results in everybody getting into a ringside fight. Somehow during all that, Gunther hit Butch with the last symphony for the 3 count. And the whole thing rounds out with Drew hitting Gunther with the Claymore kick. My final notes conclude with, this is why I hate multi-person matches in wrestling. Too much chaos, too much pandemonium, not sure in most cases who I'm supposed to root for. It's just, yeah. I never liked the idea of them doing this match to begin with, and now that I'm seeing everything unfold a week before the actual match, I'm starting to be reminded of why I hated this match idea to begin with. But I'll cover more of that when I go over my WrestleMania preview. For now, let's talk about the main event angle with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Because the tropes continue with this episode of Friday Night SmackDown. We had the good old-fashioned contract signing a couple segments prior. Naturally, we've also got to find a way to shoehorn in the proverbial WWE talk show. Yeah, I can't ever get enough of those either. The last time I saw a Kevin Owens show segment, actually, now that I think of it, I think it was last year's WrestleMania with Steve Austin, which preceded their impromptu match that ended up stealing night one and being one of the best matches of the entire year. Ain't wrestling unique sometimes? Now, albeit, this KO Talk segment was not an instant classic like that Owens-Austin showdown, but they did manage to get over a new meme by the end of it. So here's basically the gist of what happened. Really not a whole lot. Owens and Zayn joshed back and forth for a few minutes. Owens tried to stir the pot and teased dissension with joking about Sami getting the big entrance and getting all the recognition from the fans. But while Sami mentions that WrestleMania has a different vibe this year, no, it doesn't. But according to Sami, it does. So Owens brings up the deal a while back where the Bloodline gave Sami the custom honorary Oos t-shirt. But since Sami is no longer affiliated with the Bloodline, he needs a new shirt to fit the Mania season. So Owens took it upon himself to create a customized Owens Zayn t-shirt where on the back it says KO Mania, and on the front it says WrestleZania. Now that part was funny in and of itself. What made it better was that when Kevin took off his sweatshirt to reveal that he was also wearing the same shirt, Sami saw that and he popped for it, started freaking out. And it was a cool moment. You know, everyone was doing the WrestleZania chants. Again, it'll be a meme for ages. And everything looks like it's about to end in sunshine and rainbows here. They go in for the hug. And, of course, here come the Usos to crash the party. They jump the baby faces from behind and leave them laying. They try to double team on Sami once they kick Owens out of the ring, but Owens ends up running them off with a chair right before they close the show out. Now, of course, the people farted at that. But they were very overjoyed with the WrestleZania chants. And again, I just keep thinking in the back of my mind, I'm watching these guys interact. I hope Owens doesn't turn. It's like, I'm seeing a lot of warning bells flash off in my head. Like the whole way they opened the talk show with Owens coming out and acting all bitter and resentful that Sami wanted to come out with his own entrance. You know, the whole thing where he built up to the idea that WrestleMania was all about him this year because he's been the MVP in WWE for the last 12 months. It's like, I mean, if we analyze the kind of personality Kevin Owens is, the guy's made a career out of being a bitter, jealous, resentful prick. Love him or hate him. I like Owens, I always have. But the guy does have a reputation for being a douche. The guy that holds grudges. Wouldn't it be fitting, right at the moment Owens is about to win the tag team championships with Sami, his alleged best friend, wouldn't it be just for him to turn on Sami and align with the Usos? You really do wonder. I mean, we're all expecting to see the collapse of the bloodline at WrestleMania. But what if? What if they decide to keep that bloodline story going afterwards? Not saying it'll happen, or that it's likely to happen. Just saying, it's not improbable. I mean, we know Kevin Owens' relationship with Paul Heyman. For as long as Owens has been fighting the bloodline, what if it's all been a ruse? And they're secretly in cahoots with Mr. Owens. There's a Vinceism right there. Again, not likely, but not improbable. Remember that. I'm a skeptic by nature when it comes to professional wrestling. Don't ever think for a second the outcome of a major storyline is going to leave you feeling satisfied by the end. History shows otherwise. It's never the case. You build up to something, there's all this anticipation to see everybody pop for the big grand finale, and it always lets you down. There are rare exceptions, of course, but especially in the last 5 or 6 years, good Lord, they're few and far between. But as we continue to ponder the outcome of the tag team title program for WrestleMania, why don't we go ahead and do the same for the rest of the card? So here's the deal with the WrestleMania card. I have the wiki page open in front of me. Or at least I had the wiki page open in front of me before I decided to close the tab like an idiot. Hold on. To reopen it again. All right. So WrestleMania 39, we're going to go down to the matches portion of the page. So here's where we are as of this current recording. We have 2 matches that are officially announced for night 1, and we have 1 match that is officially announced for night 2. And then there's this giant tab underneath of it that says Night TBC, which I presume means to be continued, or to be continued, or to be confirmed. There are 10 matches that are currently listed here. I have no idea when they plan on officially announcing what matches are going to be happening on what night. Should I be concerned that they haven't confirmed any of that yet? I have no idea. But I'm just going to run through the list of matches that they have currently announced. I assume this is the full card for both nights. I don't really see a reason for them to announce more matches between now and this coming weekend. So I think these are all the matches that are going to be taking place in some form or another. Again, I don't know what night these matches are going to occur on, but I guess that'll be the big surprise when we get to this Saturday. So I guess I'll start with night 1. And the first match that is announced for this show, and we actually found this out as the current SmackDown report. I kind of just made a joke about it a minute ago. But it is Austin Theory versus John Cena for the United States Championship. John Cena making sure he gets the curtain jerker spot so he can work that match and get out in relatively short order. But as far as my thoughts go on this, and here's the other thing you have to keep in mind too. I talk about how I don't watch Raw, so my knowledge of the build-up to a lot of the matches that have been happening on the Raw shows is limited. So I can't really provide much context aside from just giving you my general predictions of what I think is going to happen. It doesn't seem likely that John Cena wins this match. There have been rumors circulating for a while now that this might actually be his last official match, and they'll kind of treat it as a retirement deal, which, I'm kind of ambivalent about either way. It's weird because you look at a match like this on paper and you think it probably should be a bigger deal than it really is churning out to be, but I don't know. It seems very underwhelming. Austin Theory is a solid talent. I like him. People have kind of gone back and forth with him for a while now in WWE. And it kind of goes back to the conversation I talked about with LA Knight earlier. He's obviously a talented wrestler. He's got all the tools. But for one reason or another, the booking just really hasn't reflected that. He's a guy that's kind of been jerked around for a long time on the main roster now. Yeah, he's technically he's currently a champion right now, but does he come across right now as somebody that they're grooming to eventually have a world title reign at some point down the road? I don't know. We talk about how meaningless the mid-card championships are in WWE anyway. When's the last time anybody really cared about the United States Championship? Just saying. It'll give him a good rub if he actually goes over Cena. Probably should go over clean. But I don't know. I'm sure the match will be fine. I've talked about before how I'm not a John Cena fan, and I never have been. But again, it's just a weird environment to be putting Austin Theory in. So we'll see what they do. Like I said, I predict that Theory goes over and retains the belt. What they do with him afterwards, I don't really know. Again, though, this kind of just seems like a match that maybe would have been good for them to do 2 or 3 years ago. But just thinking about this in theory, no pun intended, but let's say that Theory retains the championship here and he gets a win over Cena. Does it really do much for his career? Yeah, he gets a signature-defining win against a veteran of the business, but does beating John Cena really mean that much? Just asking. The guy hasn't worked a full-time schedule in, what are we going on now, like 5 or 6 years? The guy pops in occasionally to do jobs to whoever he's designated to work a program with, but I don't know. It doesn't really seem like the best use of either guy to me. I mean, if they are going to book John Cena in a match, this is the best you could come up with for him. Just saying. But again, I predict Theory to go over there. Hopefully the match delivers. We'll find out. The other match that they've been building up on Raw that I haven't paid that much attention to, aside from what they've been doing on the premium live specials, Seth freaking Rollins versus Logan Paul. Again, it seems like it should be a match that comes off like a big deal on paper, but when it comes to Rollins, he's kind of a guy that's been overexposed for a long time now. Mercifully, I don't watch Raw, so I don't really have to see much of what they do with him on television, but I mean, the stuff I've seen from him on the live specials, it's not been particularly enjoyable. I mean, I really liked the program he did with Cody last year, but he's still working this weird gimmick that I still can't make heads or tails of to save my life. He's just a guy that's been at the top of the card for a long time now. He's somebody that they've pushed strong, but he's also somebody that I kind of would like to get a break from, if you know what I mean. And I don't think I'm in the minority with my opinion on that. It seems obvious that he would go over Logan Paul, but who knows, really? I mean, Logan Paul's a guy that's made the most out of what he's given in a given situation. He had that really good match with Roman Reigns last year, but do I see the same coming out of him working with Rollins in Mania? I mean, like I said, it should be a very good match, but I don't really have much of an opinion on it either way. It's not really a celebrity match, per se. Logan Paul's proven that he can deliver on the big shows, but I'm kind of ambivalent about the outcome either way. Honestly, I kind of prefer Logan goes over so Rollins can go away for a while and come back fresh after we got a break from him for 5 or 6 months. That's just my take personally. You know what? Actually, now that I think of it, I was going to jump to night 2 real quick and go over the one match they have advertised there, but let me save that because it's the Universal title match. I kind of figured I should round that out with the preview here. So let's jump to the matches that are not officially slated for a night yet. Guess we'll find out by the time Friday rolls around. But we'll start with the SmackDown Women's Championship match, the Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley. I mean, you've been listening to me recap this feud on the SmackDown reports. I've talked about how the only real outcome that I'll accept at this point is Rhea Ripley going over. I just haven't been feeling this program. And it really it doesn't have much to do with me not being a Charlotte Flair fan. It's just, this is a rematch from a WrestleMania program these girls worked, 3 years ago? Right now, it just doesn't come across like a big rematch. It just kind of comes off like a subpar women's championship match. I don't know. It doesn't really have the WrestleMania feel to it. Again, I think the character dynamics in this have been completely off from the beginning. Charlotte Flair's a horrible babyface. Rhea Ripley's been getting babyface pops anyway, so I don't really know why the dynamics are flipped in this given scenario. We'll see. Rhea, like I said, Rhea needs to go over, but that's all I really have to say about it. I really haven't dug this program, so at this point, I don't really have much to hang my hat on except seeing what they do as a finish. The other championship match they have advertised for this show is Bianca Belair versus Asuka. Asuka coming back at the Royal Rumble and getting that big pop like she did, it was their way to kind of reintroduce her into the picture and build up somebody new to go into the main event scene. But again, it's kind of hard for me to judge one way or the other here because this has all been built up on Raw. But let me talk about Bianca for a second here, because she is somebody that I've put over a lot on this channel. I really do like her work. I've been a strong advocate of Bianca since the NXT run. She does start to come off as somebody, though, that they've pushed into the main event picture for a while now. She's been consistently booked in that spot. So, I don't know. You know, part of me is thinking maybe her dropping the belt to Asuka would be the best thing for her. Kind of like what I talked about with Rollins a minute ago, just to kind of get a break from her and have her go away for a while so she can come back later on when we've all gotten a chance to take a breath from it. But we'll see what they do. To my recollection, I don't think they've ever done this match before, so it is at least fresh. You know, but kind of goes back to what I've been talking about with my biggest problem with the women's division in WWE, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when I get to the Showcase Fatal 4-Way match they have announced here. You know, even with Asuka being the challenger for the belt, I like Asuka. I've been a fan of her since when she came into NXT in like 2014 or 2015. But again, she's not exactly somebody new. You know, they could put the belt on her just to kind of get it off of Bianca and send her away for a little bit, but what do you do with Asuka as the champion? I mean, is she going into this match as a heel? Because last I checked, I think Bianca was a babyface on television. Do you have any credible babyface challengers on the Raw brand that you can send after Asuka? But again, it's part of the problem with the model of the way WWE's developed their women's division. They've had the same girls on top for a long time now. You know, Asuka's been there for years. They've kind of done a lot with her. You know, she had that undefeated streak once upon a time, which they fed to Charlotte, which was a giant mistake. But has anybody really cared about Asuka in the last several years? It's another match on the card that probably should feel like a bigger deal on paper than it's probably going to end up being. We'll see. And then comes one of the matches on this card that I'm just beyond baffled with. You know, there were rumors circulating a while ago that the initial plan was to do Brock Lesnar versus Gunther at WrestleMania, and I was a huge advocate of that match. I mean, you just think about the possibilities of how they could have built up that program, the things that they could have done in the ring together. I mean, easily it would be the most interested I'd be in seeing a Brock Lesnar match in God knows how long. You know, he turned down the program with Bray Wyatt, which was a good decision on his part. You know, as I look at the card now, it looks like that match with Bobby Lashley is off. So, thank God for small favors. We won't have to see that match take place. But then I look at his opponent, and it's Omos. And it's like, my God, can you think of any other wrestler on this roster that they've tried to get the most out of and have failed on every account? I mean, they're just destined with every fiber of their being to get this guy over. And it's, I'm sorry, it's not working. It hasn't worked since day one. And no matter who you pair the guy with, no matter who you put him in a program with, eventually the reality is going to have to set in that, yeah, he's a big dude, but Giant Gonzalez was a big dude. Didn't mean that he was a good professional wrestler. This is what they're getting out of Lesnar. They're going to have him try to pry a relatively watchable match out of Omos. Good the fuck luck with that. I mean, it could be train wreck level bad, where it's just so awful you can't take your eyes off of the screen. I mean, there is like a certain entertainment value that I'm looking forward to with this match, but am I expecting this to be one of Brock Lesnar's better showcase matches? No. And honestly, Lesnar going over kind of seems like the obvious choice, but then it just kind of seems like a waste. Like, you could pair Lesnar with a million other guys in the roster right now. Anybody would be better than Omos. Anybody. Ugh. I don't get it. I really don't. Nor do I get the three-way Intercontinental Championship match with Gunther, Sheamus, and Drew McIntyre. But again, I've already kind of ranted about that on the SmackDown report. I don't think I need to go to the well with that again. I prefer just a regular singles match with Gunther and somebody. Again, I would rather prefer to see him and Brock Lesnar, but that's not the match we're getting now. Kind of just seems like an excuse to shoehorn McIntyre and Sheamus on the card, if I'm being honest. And it's like, I mean, even a program with Gunther and McIntyre, I thought about it. I'm like, at least it would be better than trying to throw Sheamus in there just to add another body to the mix. But then I give it more thought, and I'm like, do I really want to see McIntyre versus Gunther? Not particularly. I really hate to go back to the well with the exact same thing, but it's the talking point of overexposure. Guys being around for a long time, not getting the best mileage put into them, and they're on the card, but do you really want to see them on the card? Drew McIntyre, this guy was a world champion for this company a few years ago. Sort of a reconciliation for all the crap they put him through with his first run before he got released. He honed his craft on the indie circuit. He came back with all this momentum. Came back in really good shape too. And it really looked like they were going to get off with a second footing with this guy, and they were going to do it right. And of course the whole scamdemic kind of ruined things, and they put the belt on him at the worst possible time. And now he's just kind of a guy that exists. He toils around the mid-card scene, but that's kind of it. And the same thing goes with Sheamus. God almighty, that guy's been around for well over a decade now. I can't tell you the last time I've been excited to see a Sheamus match. I mean, I know him and Gunther had that great IC title match last year, but can you think of anything else Sheamus has been involved with recently that you're like dying to see? I sure can't. It's just going to be a muddled mess. It's going to be a three-way spot fest. Gunther will probably retain. I don't really see a reason to put the belt on either Sheamus or McIntyre. So it's one of those matches where they managed to get me to not care about a Gunther match. It's kind of the reality of the situation. Hate to say it, but that's kind of where we are. Then there's this other match here that I guess they've been building up on Raw. Trish Stratus, Lita, and Becky Lynch versus Damage Control. My God, that faction still exists, huh? Bayley, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky. Who else forgot about that crew? Show of hands. Wow. I mean, there's some name value there. Are you really going to get that much out of Trish and Lita at this stage in the game? God almighty. I mean, they're definitely not young bucks anymore. And Becky Lynch. This is what they got Becky doing? You talk about chicks that used to be at the top of the pecking order when it came to WWE's women's division. This is one of their alleged 4 horsewomen. And this is what they got her doing? Man, even dating as far back to the Royal Rumble this year, it kind of looked like they were setting her up to have a match with Bianca, right? I mean, I know plans change, but this was their backup plan for Becky Lynch? Throwing her in a 6-person tag match? I don't know. I mean, I have no opinion on the outcome either way because, again, I haven't really been following this feud all that closely. But kind of just seems like void filler, if you want my honest opinion. I mean, I presume that the babyfaces go over in this match. Presuming the babyfaces are Trish, Lita, and Becky, which I think they are. It's hard to tell anymore. But, yeah, it's just kind of another match that's on the card, but does anybody really care about it? And here's one, too, that I'm still kind of contemplating. And again, it's another Raw match, so I can't really weigh in with the storyline buildup. Although I can say that for as long as this frickin' Judgment Day stuff's been going on, I can't believe that this is still being factored into this guy's storylines. But Edge versus Finn Balor in a Hell in a Cell match. I mean, again, if the buildup is all supposed to circulate around what's been going on with the Judgment Day faction, how long has that story been going on? Well over a year? You know, I know Edge and Balor had that I Quit match last year that people kind of raved about. I'm sure the match will be good, but do I really want to see it? Not really. I mean, I like Finn Balor. I like Edge. But I'm just going to call it as I see it. Are we going to try to sit here and pretend like Edge's run in WWE has been any good? I mean, he's had occasional moments where he's shined. But ever since last year's WrestleMania and the whole thing that they did where he started that faction with Damian Priest and Balor and Rhea Ripley, and then they kicked him out of the group. And I mean, I guess the Cell match is supposed to give it some kind of culmination or finality, but we'll see. And who do you put over? Okay, if Edge wins, then what do you do with him? And if Balor wins, what do you do with him? I mean, this has got to be the blow-off, right? Again, it's just a matter of wasted potential. They had a chance to put the championship on Edge, too. And they just didn't do it. They didn't capitalize on it. Now he's just a guy. And for a guy like Edge that worked so hard to get back in ring shape and overcome the retirement so he could get back in the ring and have one final run, this is the mileage they're getting out of him? Doesn't seem like the best usage. We'll see, though. These next two matches I'm not even going to bother talking about. I'm just going to gloss over them real quick. The WrestleMania Showcase Fatal 4-Way matches. Why? Seriously, why? Just to cram a bunch of mid-card bodies on the card? Who cares? Liv Morgan, Raquel Gonzalez versus Natty and Shotzi versus Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler versus one more team to be announced. Does anyone care? I don't. That match sounds like a horror show. You know, in the men's match, Braun Strowman and Ricochet versus the Street Profits versus Alpha Academy versus the Viking Raiders. Like, who cares? That's like pre-show material. That's a top-of-the-hour TV match is what that is. Neither of those matches belong on a WrestleMania card. I'm sorry. Sue me if you think otherwise. Just another clear-cut example of them trying to shoehorn in as many people as they can onto the card. 2 4-ways and a 3-way, plus a 6-person tag match. Plus another tag team title match I'm going to talk about in just a second here, but no, I don't need to see that. Those will probably be my designated piss breaks. Hopefully they book one of those matches on night 1 and the other on night 2, but not really feeling that one, Mr. Krabs. Now, when it comes to the Usos versus Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, again, you know, we've been covering this in the SmackDown reports. I followed the build from this as well as the clips that I've seen from Raw, so I've pretty extensively been checking this program out. I am looking forward to this, and this is going to kind of want to be those discussion points that I think a lot of people are going to be having within the next several days. the whole topic or discussion of what match should ideally main event night one, because we already know what's going to main event night two. People have been saying it's going to be the Charlotte Rhea match. I mean, I have my own opinions on that. My opinion is fuck off, for one. But I'm sorry. If the Usos versus Owens and Zayn does not main event night one, then these people are out of their ever-loving rabid minds. I mean, aside from the Cody Roman thing, the Bloodline story has been the central storyline of WWE in the last 12 months. How in the fuck you could not main event that match on night one is beyond me. The only people that want to see Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley main event night one are all the fucking weirdo feminist activists that pretend like equity actually matters in professional wrestling. No, when it comes to Flair and Ripley over the Usos and Owens and Zayn, we all know what match needs to main event night one, and that's this match, especially if there's going to be a title change. I know I made my jokes about whether or not Owens turns on Zayn or vice versa, but all kidding aside, it's pretty evident that there is going to be a title switch here. This is probably the match that you do the tag team championship or the title switch on. I mean, I can't think of any two other guys that you could ever flip the belts onto at this point. The storyline's called for it. The people would go nuts for it. It would kind of feel like an actual culmination to the Owens-Zayn story throughout WWE. We always kind of talk about how they're joined at the hip in terms of all the stuff they've been involved with together. We all know they're best friends. We all know that this would sort of be an achieving moment for their careers. Seeing Owens and Zayn win the belts together at WrestleMania like that could be a big moment. I just don't see how you can close out night one with anything other than that match. Because it's like, what's supposed to follow that? Even if Rhea beats Charlotte for the women's championship, it's like, okay, is it going to get the same pop or the same reaction with Owens and Zayn winning the belts from the Usos? After all the investment and all the stock they put into Jimmy and Jay's title run? I don't even think they're on the same playing field. They're not even remotely compatible. But we'll see what they do. We all know WWE has a weird fascination with trying to 50-50 everything between the men and the women. So if Roman and Cody main events night two, you probably ought to suspect that Charlotte and Rhea is going to main event night one. Because, women's rights or something like that. But we'll see. But again, I really am looking forward to that match. That's probably the second match on this card that I'm looking forward to the most. Like I said, I expect a title change to happen, but we all know how the wacky world of pro wrestling works. Could be a swerve. Then obviously we have the Rey and Dominic match, which, again, we talked about a little bit in the SmackDown review. They finally made this match official, so again, I hope all the build-up's worth it. Again, people have been back and forth whether or not they really want to see this match. I don't know if I'm necessarily interested in the actual match. I'm more so interested in seeing how Dominic actually works in a singles environment like that. Last year they did the tag team thing with him and Rey. It worked for what they were designed to do, but this is technically Dominic's first real big showcase match on a major pay-per-view. So there's a lot of pressure on him going in. And I think for them, for WWE, for all the build-up they've given him and all the TV time they've dedicated to try to get this guy over as a heel, it's going to be a tough situation for him because if he goes out there and lays an egg, kind of makes all that build-up not worth it. But then again, if he goes out there and tears the house down with Rey, it could give WWE a lot of faith in him to push him as like a upper mid-carder down the road. Now, yes, he's very green and inexperienced, so that's still a ways down the road, but at least if they know that Dom can deliver in those high-pressure situations, they probably would feel a lot more comfortable in continuing to book him and elevate him up the card. And again, Ray's a class act, so he'll make sure to go in there and carry Dom to something remotely watchable. But, Dom's got to hold up his end of the bargain too. So it's not, like I said, it's not necessarily me being excited to see this specific match, but just trying to see how Dom works in the WrestleMania environment like that. But the final match to cover here is the Undisputed Universal Championship match with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. Again, we know this is going to be the match that main events night 2, so that's in the books now. There's a lot to say about it. Quite frankly, I could go on for another 45 minutes about this if I wanted to, but I think the ultimate question really comes down to this. We all know the match is going to deliver. That's a given. It's Roman Reigns, it's Cody Rhodes. The only way that this match could not be good is if somebody gets hurt or for whatever reason the chemistry just gets way off and they just fall apart in the ring. But I highly doubt that to be the case. I expect this to be the best match out of any of the nights. Either of the nights, I guess. But the ultimate question really boils down to this. You've kept Roman undefeated for basically 2.5, almost 3 years now. Whatever day they're approaching with him as champion, it's closing in on the thousands at this point. Is this the moment to strike? With all the build they've given to this, the redemption story of Cody coming back to WWE and winning the belt for his daddy, the belt that they took from his daddy in the garden. There's so much story build to this. There's so much history that goes behind this match. They've done such a fantastic job building this up on the TV. I've heard people say that Roman probably should beat Cody. And I've weighed options. I've thought about it. I've really, really, really tried to think, okay, if they swerve us, if they decide that they don't want to flip the belt, who else do you have that could possibly beat Roman? Really think about that for a minute. Let's say they don't jump on Cody. Let's say that they have a last-minute change of plans and they say, Cody's not the guy. We want fill in the blank to be the guy to beat Roman. What do you do with Cody? Doesn't this kind of cut his balls out from under him? You're telling me, after the injury, after the triumphant return last year at WrestleMania, the 3 consecutive wins over Seth Rollins, that classic moment where he's in the cell and half of his body is just mangled. He goes away. He gets surgery. He's off of television. He comes back, wins the Royal Rumble. Everybody goes nuts for it. You do that slow burn build with him coming out on television and talking about how this is how many years in the making kind of storyline where he's finally going to win the big one. He's finally going to go out there and prove to the world that he's not just a mid-card player, that he can be the guy. And the fans have taken to him. They've responded well. You're telling me that you're going to get to almost the peak of the mountain with him. You're going to push and push and push and push and push all the way up, and then right at the point where Cody needs to deliver, right at the point where he's about to grab that brass ring, and you're going to take that away from him? And again, here's the issue that I see happening. Let's say Roman wins. But let's say, for example, that you want to keep Cody in the main event picture and you want to maybe send him back at Roman, say like a SummerSlam to win the belt. How are the fans going to respond to it? Are they going to cheer Cody? Are they going to be as behind him? What happens if he gets the Lex Luger treatment? I mean, we're going through the Retro Raw archives in 94. We've seen how Vince soured on Lex Luger when he was at its hottest run in the company. He never won the big one. They put him right at the top of the mountain with all those top guys, and he just never overcame that one extra obstacle. They just always held back from him becoming the guy. What if the same thing happens to Cody? Again, there's so much story that goes behind this. It's not just the bloodline stuff. It's everything with Dusty. It's everything that goes back to him being jerked around and treated like a joke with his first run in the company. People holding him down, saying that he doesn't have it, saying that he'll never be the guy. He'll always be a bit player. He'll always be a mid-carder for life. That's been Cody Rhodes' legacy in the WWE for pretty much his entire run. But here he is back. This is his second chance at redemption. This is his opportunity to prove everybody wrong, that he can hang with the top guys. You know, and again, we talk about his run with AEW. It wasn't the right fit for him. It wasn't the right crew of guys. It wasn't a good working environment for him. He didn't fit. There was something always off about Cody and All Elite Wrestling. He's such a natural fit for the WWE machine. Whether or not you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it doesn't matter. Remove that from the conversation for a minute. Cody Rhodes is a much more natural fit in this company, and he always has been, and I've always thought that. From the moment he showed up to AEW, I thought, why is Cody here? Well, the reason Cody was in AEW was for him to develop his career and to build himself up and to show that he can overcome the Stardust gimmick, which he did. Now he's back, but he's just being himself. He's being an extension of his own personality. This is the moment to strike. Because if you don't do it now, you might not get this moment again. Again, you can hold off. You can wait. You could do the title switch at SummerSlam. But how are the people going to respond to it? Is it going to be too little too late? That's what I'm afraid of. And here's the other thing. Thinking about this too. Roman Reigns has been pretty protected. But this is a guy that's been working a semi-full-time schedule for basically 3 or 4 years. Since he came back from the whole COVID thing, and they put the belt on him, the guy's never been hurt. The guy's been very consistent. He's somebody that WWE's put a lot of investment into. How often can we say in modern wrestling anymore that you can give somebody a long championship reign like this and that you can trust that they're going to stay healthy? Roman has stayed healthy. He's always been there. What if a freak accident happens? And what if you have to change course of plans? So, let's say by the time you get to SummerSlam, what if they have to relinquish the belt and Cody doesn't beat Roman? Okay, so he wins the championship, but he doesn't beat Roman. Because that's the other part of the story element here too. Roman's been undefeated for, like I said, whatever it is, 2.5 years now, almost 3 years. Somebody's got to eventually be the guy to beat him. So this isn't really necessarily just about Cody becoming a champion, but it's also about him kind of putting a little bit of closure to this bloodline story. Being the guy to beat Roman Reigns. The guy that's run roughshod over this entire roster. He's beaten everybody. Except for Cody. Isn't this kind of the marquee moment to do that? To have Cody go over Roman? Solidify himself as a top guy? And then you have your way to build a SummerSlam. You can run with Cody as the top babyface champion for a while. You have a lot of heels that you could build up to throw in his way. Gunther is a probable option. If they start redeveloping him, you could throw LA Knight into that mix. Maybe you could throw Austin Theory in there. I don't know if I'd be an advocate of seeing this, but you could always go back to the well with him and Rollins again, if at least for like a one-and-done blow-off match. You could do stuff with Edge. And there's a lot of guys you could put at Cody that would be fresh opponents. How many options do you really have for Roman at this point? You know, again, he's not really working a full-time schedule right now. He's very part-time basis. He makes sporadic appearances. He'll work the occasional big shows. He's not on television every week, but how many fresh new guys can you really pin up against Roman? Not just that, but top baby faces. Does WWE even have any of those at this point? Roman's beat them all from what I know. Cody's the only guy that he hasn't gone over. Yeah, man, I think it's too obvious of a decision. The only reason that you would keep the belt on Roman at this point is to swerve the audience, to get those stupid shock fan reactions that WWE likes to get. The Undertaker Brock Lesnar WrestleMania reaction. I'm not saying it'd be stupid to keep the belt on Roman, but is counterproductive an accurate enough term? Because this could really damage or tarnish Cody if they decide to keep the belt on Roman and wedge Cody into the background for another 5 or 6 months until, like I said, maybe they want to do the blow-off at SummerSlam, but can you keep Cody that interesting for that long? Because what's his follow-up promo going to be on Raw? Well, guys, I lost. Just didn't have it in me. So that's just my perspective on it. Yes, you can keep the belt on Roman, but do you really need to? Has it started to overstay its welcome a little bit? I think it's a fair analysis, but you can all let me know down below what you think. So, that's my WrestleMania preview. You know, I'm cautiously optimistic for both nights. Again, it would be nice to get a little more clarity on when these matches are happening exactly and what's especially going to round out night one. But guess we'll find out on the go-home show. That would be SmackDown, I guess. Hopefully we get some finality or closure to this because right now they're not giving me a whole lot to run on. There's 1 or 2 matches on here that I'm really looking forward to. A couple that I'm mildly interested in seeing, but boy, howdy, is there a lot of filler on this show. There's way too many goddamn women's matches, too. But, again, I could go on for another half-hour tirade about that if I wanted to. We'll kind of round it out there. So, if you plan on watching the show, let me know what you think down below. Share your thoughts as well. Let me know if my predictions were a little bit off base or if you have differing opinions on what you see as the outcomes for some of these matches. I don't even know if I really bothered talking about half the outcomes. Some of them I gave predictions for. Other ones I just kind of glossed over the storylines. But we'll see what they do. In the meantime, we will be back on Friday for the regular Friday podcast, the Retro Series and the Dynamite Report. And then next weekend, like I mentioned, there will be a Retro Raw report, and then we'll have both nights of WrestleMania to review, but there will be no SmackDown review, so just don't be caught off guard when you don't see that next weekend. Trust me, it'll be a long enough show. We don't really need to add another 2-hour television review into there. So, until then, we'll see you on Friday. Take care. Peace out.